There's a famous saying that never mud wrestle a pig because you get really
Right,
dirty and the pig likes it, right? So
right,
taking the high road and being true to your values as opposed to trying to fight fire with fire and becoming
right.
toxic yourself is really important.
Welcome to the Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now, here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Well, hello and welcome to everyone. I'm Dr. Stephen Oliver, or known as Dr. O, and welcome to my podcast, Taking the Next Step in Leadership. The purpose of this podcast is to give younger and newer managers some ideas, some thoughts, tips, and techniques on how to navigate their career and things that they can utilize from my guest in advancing their career. I invite senior leaders to the podcast and ask them to tell a little bit about their successes in their career and some things that they may want to recommend to, be careful of or do over or try again. I have a lot of senior leaders in healthcare, in the learning space. I have academic professors, book authors, consultants to come in, and it's a great array of folks to come in for this podcast. So it's my honor to have Professor Mark Erath from the University of Virginia School of Continuing and Professional Studies. Professor Erath teaches there in a health sciences program. Actually, I am honored I get to teach with him in that course, and we've known each other for several years now, become good friends, and we even walked the lawn at University of Virginia this past spring. That was very exciting. That's a spectacular graduation in Charlottesville, Virginia. Professor Erath has a really distinguished career, over 40 years experience in the administration and leadership of healthcare management. And he is done auditing, he's done advising, consulting for healthcare organizations nationwide. Some of those are Price Waterhouse Coopers, Geisinger Medical Center, and Parkland Health and Hospital System. He also has taught at the health sciences program at Mary Baldwin University in Virginia. So it's really great to see you today. Welcome. How are you doing today, Professor Erath?
Excellent, Dr. O. Thanks so much for the opportunity. And it's always fun to chat with you.
Well, I learned so much from you, and we have great conversations about healthcare, schools, life. So glad for you to come today. So you're going to be talking a little bit about pivoting and pivots, not only in people's careers, but then pivoting when organizations change. There's so much change going on right now in our world, and especially in healthcare. Healthcare is pretty crazy. Well, it always is. But, how can people pivot and take the next step or do something different in their career or just be aware of change? And so I wanted to just start out with, what are you up to right now? What are some things that you're doing other than teaching and working with students at UVA?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. O. So basically, now I spend a lot of time advising students in addition to teaching. And I also spend a bit of time doing volunteer work. A big part of that is with the Malcolm Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. People may have heard about the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, and I've served as a master examiner for that
Okay.
for many years. And that has given me a real window into change excellence and how to do it systematically.
And is the Malcolm Baldrige specifically for healthcare organizations or other organizations?
Actually, it's a presidential level award for role model organizations in every industry.
Okay.
I tend to focus, but not exclusively, on healthcare organizations, and we develop a team of examiners who evaluate applications by various organizations that have been on the journey for excellence. And
Okay.
those organizations then, based on our evaluation, are considered for the award.
Right. Well, that's wonderful. That's great work that you're doing with organizations and recognizing their achievements and excellence. So let's talk just a little bit about pivots. Can you just tell us a little bit about what does pivoting mean?
Yeah, well, Dr. O, I think of the proverb that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting
Right.
different results. Pivoting is the opposite of insanity. So, pivoting is devoted to completely changing the way you do something for different or better outcomes. And to pivot successfully, you need to develop resilience and agility for change. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to go
Right.
about doing that.
Yes, that's one of the big questions coming up. But let me ask you this. This podcast is targeted for younger, newer managers or newer people just in their careers. Especially, I mean, we see that where we teach because we have graduating seniors going out into the world. They're actually already out in the world. But why should someone at a younger, newer phase in their career even consider and think about pivoting?
Well, it's a really interesting question because this is really the genesis of this discussion and a lot of my thinking, Dr. O, because in my work, I'm helping a lot of students to pivot from being in school to starting their careers. Or maybe they've already had a bit of a career and they want to go to graduate school or move
Right.
into a different role. So I'm spending a lot of time, which I really love to do as a mentor and coach, to help new people to figure out how to pivot from where they are to where they're going. The other interesting thing about it is I'm also helping a lot of people in my network who are mid-careerists and very senior
Right.
people
Mm.
at like the CEO level, the
Right.
C-suite. And as I've engaged with them, what I've found is the things we talk about people at a very advanced level are the same things we talk about with people at the starting blocks. So I got to thinking about, what's the method? How do you systematically go about these things? And so it's very important, really, not just at the beginning, but at all stages of your career. The things we'll talk about systems, approaches, methodologies, techniques, strategic and tactical, are relevant really at any stage of your career.
That's well said. The School of Continuing and Professional Studies at the University of Virginia targets folks who are a little older. They're not traditional 18, 19, and 20. They're anywhere from 27 to 50. Actually, I had a 70-year-old. Twice I've had a 70-year-old. But these are folks who some may have hit a roadblock in their careers because they don't have a bachelor's. Others want more information, more studies, more knowledge. And so they come back to these health science program to pursue this bachelor's degree. So it's a non-traditional student. And when we're saying juniors and seniors, they're a little bit older. But that's one thing I love about this group because they bring such a rich knowledge of experience. And so when you're teaching and you're talking about topics, well, they've experienced a lot of what we're talking about. So it's a really great group of students.
It's a timeless yearning, I would say, Dr. O, for
Mhm.
different reasons.
Yep.
It's fundamental to our human condition to want to strive and move on to something different or better. And we need to think methodically and prepare for what's next and do that as soon as possible and realize
Right.
we're all on a continuum and change is going to happen sometimes when we least expect it.
Right. Why is change, resilience, and agility so important as competencies for developing leaders and especially connecting to pivoting?
Well, what I would say, Dr. O, is we're in a period of pretty radical transformation in
Hmm.
the healthcare sector in particular, as really in society in all sorts of different areas of the world, driven by lots of different dynamics. And I'm displaying a slide that I developed based on my synthesis of thinking about the healthcare sector and radical transformation. And the driving forces of this maelstrom include things like shifting government rules and regulations, ever
Yes.
tighter economics, heightened demands from consumers or customers to
Hmm.
be patients or members in a healthcare sense, how business models are being redefined and operations are changing. A lot of that is driven by technological breakthroughs. So, all these forces of change are demonstrating and creating conditions of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we need to figure out how we're going to thrive and succeed in that changing environment.
I love that VUCA model. That's a great change model stemming from the military. Uh, and you're right. I mean, healthcare, and to me, healthcare sends mixed messages. I live in a city where there's major medical systems here, and they're building these monstrous buildings, but yet there's layoffs at some of them. Nursing is there's always a need for nurses. And there's a shortage of nurses. However, it's a career that a lot of folks are going into, both men and women, and then other types of healthcare jobs. We predominantly have in our program healthcare students who come in and they're working in some form of healthcare. So, healthcare just economically, financially, and then, of course, certainly there are challenges in the federal government with healthcare. So, it's a roller coaster ride for sure.
Sure. And, these kind of changes are not really new. We might think that we're in an era that's unique in all of history, but our forebears and the people coming behind us are going to similarly face dramatic changes. And we need to be prepared to deal with that. And I could personalize this a little bit, Dr. O, if you'd like me to give everybody a glimpse into my own personal pivots over time.
Tell us a little bit about that. That would be very interesting.
So I'm displaying a slide here as I reflected on our discussion today. And I went through the chronology of my life and career. On the left side, I listed all these progressive roles that I've had over time in life, through school, then throughout my career. I came up with almost 40 different roles, functions,
Right.
skills, competencies that demanded rather dramatic pivots. Then I started thinking it's not just the roles, but where have I done work in terms of different industries? I list out all these different industries where I've done work
Mhm.
over my
Right.
career that had very different business models, different products, different technical backgrounds, different economics and so forth. And then I've also thought about, like where place wise did I do these things? I've worked meaningfully in a lot of different states, lived in different places. All of these realities of my existence have demanded significant pivoting over time. I can't say I always did it with optimum resilience or agility.
Right. Mhm.
That's what I wanted to really think more carefully about and talk to you about is how do you move beyond winging it as you
Mhm.
go into a more standardized, systematic approach that you can use and tailor depending on the complexity of the challenges or the changes before you that kind of represent almost like a recipe for how to go about preparing for the pivot, being engaged so that when change is needed, you can move with great agility and resilience and then follow through beyond that. So that those were a lot of my thoughts.
Well, this is a great chart, if you will, your roles, your industries, your places. I think if more of us listed those, I think that could help us show the trajectory of where we came from and where we're going. And younger folks could even lay this out. The old school model was finished school and you went to a company and you worked there for 30, 40, 50 years, you retired, you got your gold watch, and you moved to Florida. Now, not everybody, but
Right.
that was more of a traditional model, but that's has gone away. And more people are doing many careers. If I listed this chart, I would have something very similar. And
Yeah.
even in my consulting,
Right.
many different industries.
It's
So,
look back after
yep,
45 years, but I gained perspective and experience, skills, knowledge along the way. And sometimes you don't even realize what you're picking up in terms of abilities, insights that are going to pay off later on. My very first job in life was as a volunteer throughout high school in surgery. And I was just kind of the gopher. I did whatever people needed me to do. I'd help with moving patients and entertaining kids as they were wheeled back for surgery. Then there was a gap of about 8 or 10 years before I actually began professional work in the healthcare arena.
right.
And all of those experiences came back at me, and I knew a lot more than I even realized that was beneficial.
Again, I think we're thrown into things and we have to make the best out of them to take that next pivot.
Yep.
So you have a model for empowering personal professional leadership pivots. I wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit about that. It's
And
very interesting.
yeah, and this is me basically sitting down with pen to paper, Dr. O,
Mhm,
reflecting on how could I take this hodgepodge of experiences and winging it over time, things that I did well, and I'll say in a deliberate way, but I never put it down in the context of a system that could be followed by people in a generic way, regardless of where they are in their career, but also, especially at the beginning of their career. So they're preparing to pivot, building resilience and agility for change that is an inevitability.
mhm,
So the model is one, it starts with you in the middle. And there are three elements that I think we need to, as individuals and professionals, to focus on about us in the middle of various change processes. We talked about, pivoting as being kind of part of the human condition. It's our
right.
nature to dream big, to resolve challenges, and get better at impacting worlds one way or another in the worlds that we live in, which is really exciting. So we need to realize that change is a constant. And we also have imperatives when it comes to pivoting, whether it's by your choice or due to uncontrollable
Mhm,
conditions. Pivoting in different and often unexpected
mhm,
directions is going to be required for you to succeed in achieving the goal.
mhm.
It's a guaranteed part of your life. And the real important thing to remember about that is don't get caught in a flat footed reactive mode. The
Right,
final point is, and this gets to the system that we'll talk about here a little more, is you got to prepare for success. You have to develop and use active systems to successfully change with resilience and agility so you can leverage all your ingenuity. And then rather than winging it, as I often did, use
right.
systematic approaches to promote your success. So I offer two levels of action: systematic
Okay.
strategies and tactical strategies.
Okay. I'd like to go into those, but I do want to ask you, I love this almost like cartoon, and this to me is so fun and funny, but yet it's the reality. You have your plan of action, but then the reality of the world around you.
Right.
So say a little bit about that. How do
Yeah.
sometimes those two don't connect?
Yeah, and I found this online, and I think we all, especially starting out in any new endeavor, we're excited. We have this goal in mind. We see a clear vision of where we want to go. And then reality sets in, and it's a little hairier than what you might of,
Right.
they'll be up.
Well, sometimes I think we fall off that bicycle.
Exactly, and we may not even have a bike, steal
Right.
the bike, and now what do we do? But,
Right.
you don't really know necessarily what's gonna happen next, what's over the horizon or around the bend, and this is where ingenuity comes into play. We as people, as professionals, we learn a lot of skills, but sometimes the problems are new and different, things that we haven't experienced before. And so we're going to have to figure out how to go over pits and climb mountains and cross streams and deal with bad weather that may happen at the least opportune time, but is going to demand, again, is resilience, agility, and testing our ingenuity.
Mhm.
The other thing that
Yeah.
isn't evident in this cartoon, and I think it's one of the most important things to consider, is it's always a team sport. Definitely you have to go it alone sometimes, but if you're really smart and effective, some of the techniques that we'll talk about, you'll face these challenges with a team and not ever have to go it alone.
That's one thing I love about University of Virginia SCPS and the program we teach in. There's so many folks there to help students out, faculty, staff, and then even senior leaders within students to just help people navigate through that program. So, how about some of your systems? Can you tell us about your systems? You have a six systems strategy.
All of these systematic steps, if you will, whether they're overarching, strategic, and more detailed tactical, are part of a system. They go together and they're happening simultaneously. So you need to think about both spheres of your activity, keep both of those going, and realize that it's like layers of an onion. They're not necessarily going to be one step after another. They're going to all be almost like planets circling you at the
Yes.
same. So that takes the ability to manage multiple processes at one time. So the first one are the six systematic strategies, and we can go through them one by one. And I'll start with positive mental attitude. I think we've all heard, Dr. O, and I'm sure there's studies about this, that people hate change. They resist change.
Right.
It's understandable. It's tough. It requires abandoning things that have been familiar to you, getting outside your comfort zone,
Mhm.
learning new things, and so forth. And, you got to have a glasses half full kind of attitude about change, have a positive mental attitude. And really, what that means is you need to develop a sense of gratitude and embrace all the gifts and infinite possibilities you can control to apply those gifts regardless of the things that are happening outside your control. Doesn't mean you like what's happening outside your control, but
Right.
you can become bogged down if all you're thinking about
Mhm.
is everything outside your control and you forfeit the things that you can control, the levers that you can pull. So I think it's important that you thrive and celebrate that you're the captain in command of your own ship, and you need to not fear what's going to happen. You have to banish self limiting thoughts and behaviors and recognize that everything's going to work out and you'll make that happen because of your ingenuity, resilience, and agility.
And I mean, that's so important. The only thing we really can change is ourself.
Yeah,
Can't change anything that's going on around us, but we can change ourselves. So
right.
that's a great first component of the six systematic strategies. How about the second one?
Yeah, well, before I do that, I did want to say
Okay.
that having this mental attitude really
Hmm.
requires you to step back from the fray,
Hmm.
the day to day, and you got to make space for yourself to think deeply and objectively about what's happening, and what's going on so that you can be strategic and not get sucked into bad events or conditions
Hmm.
around you that you can't control. So that applies to all these systematic strategies. So
Any suggestion on how not to? Because so many people do get sucked into the negativity
yeah.
and there's so many Debbie Downers
Right.
around us. And how can we kind of step away or have some boundaries with
Yep.
that?
Yep. Well, actually, that takes us to number two, Dr.
Okay, great.
And I would say maybe one of the most important things to do, and there are lots of components to answer your question, but cultivating and harvesting the fruits of rich mentoring relationships. You
Yes.
got to cultivate mentors and coaches and habitually schedule and seek diverse, objective perspectives, knowledge, and support from people who are more experienced than you. So, the goal here, the strategic thing that everybody really needs to do and do better at, is to impanel mentors and coaches who care about you, your progress. They'll share candid insights. They'll compassionately tell you what you may not want to hear. And they'll invest time and energy to help you to address risks that you're facing, whether they're negatives, positives, or uncertainties. And they'll help you to plan on how to deal with those things if you listen carefully and follow through. So, Dr. O, I'm engaged with a number of people who are
Mhm.
facing really toxic workplaces.
Yes.
And I give them a lot of ideas and advice on how to stay above the fray a little bit and not
Hmm.
get, there's a famous saying that never mud wrestle a pig because you get really
Right.
dirty and the pig likes it, right? So
Right.
taking the high road and being true to your values as opposed to trying to fight fire with fire and becoming
Right.
toxic yourself is really important. Having people who are objective, been there, done that, been in
Hmm.
toxic environments, they can help you replay events,
Hmm.
temper the emotions that you understandably feel,
Hmm.
and
Right.
then develop more effective ways to deal with toxic personalities, toxic situations, and become a beacon for
Hmm.
doing things better. And then you may have hope to sort of change the equation as people see you as a role model and leader, or
Hmm.
you need to get out of that situation.
And that's well said. I think it's important to have more than one mentor in your life and your career. Typically, a mentor is someone older sharing experiences that they've had for you. But I have mentors of all ages. I have several younger mentors who help me with technology, especially the gentleman who does our podcast. Somebody who has an expertise in something that you don't have, and they can mentor you through different technologies, different things. So, I think it's important to have lots of mentors.
Absolutely.
And so, how about your third strategy here?
Yeah, so it's really important to clarify and regularly refresh what I'm terming as your guiding North Star.
Okay.
Another way to describe that would be, what is your why mission?
Mm.
What is your vision? What is your purpose? What are your self beliefs and overarching goals? So if you don't have clarity about that and have that North Star serve as your guide or anchor for your behavior, you can pretty easily lose your way and you might move in directions that don't have a center point. So, having that North Star clarified and always bright and refreshed is really important for how you navigate from that point, from where you are to where you want to go. If you're not tied into your North Star, your purpose, your reason for being, you might kind of succumb to the dark side. So you got to have clarity around what really makes you tick and what your self beliefs are.
I was just saying that's so important, and that's part of
Yep.
one course I teach is emotional intelligence, and the first dichotomy of that model is self-awareness, knowing who you are and what you're about, your values and morals, and that's critical for your emotions and also critical for your leadership.
I've done those batteries of various tests, Myers-Briggs, DISC, and
Hmm.
other things that
Hmm.
have been really eye-opening for me about my personality, what my sort of basic style is, and also to understand the other people that I'm dealing with and where do they come from? What are their motivations? What are their habits and styles? And a lot of times, by being aware of my traits and those of others, I can understand clashes waiting to happen and adapt my approaches. And a mentor, back to the other point, maybe they don't have the training of psychoanalyzing people, if you will, if that's the right way
Right.
to put it, but they understand it intuitively and they can give practical advice without knowing what your letters are and so forth to be able to do better. But Dr. O, one thing that I happened across several years ago is this Japanese concept called Ikigai, which
Hmm. Right.
means
Yes.
a reason for being.
Hmm.
And it's a very simple and elegant model that you can see here. And it focuses on what I call four domains that work together, define what your reason for being is. And the four domains are what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can be paid for. These four things, as I have come to think about this, and the overlap that defines your reason for being, are the domains that we really need to get in touch with because they together define what our North Star is.
That would be something great for folks to look at and think about. These have been some great strategies. I want to know if you could go into the fourth strategy, on positioning and assessments.
Right. So once you have clarity on your guiding North Star, and that's something you need to refresh routinely, the next step is to take stock of where you're positioned relative to your North Star. And by that, what I mean, Dr. O, is to evaluate your strengths and improvement opportunities, and then concrete actions you might need to take to improve your position where you are today. A good way to do that is that many professions provide free competency models with progressive proficiency ladders that you can use to objectively survey where you are in your career development and then target your progress to build your knowledge, skills, and abilities in key areas that are essential to succeed in a given profession or career. And they're a gold mine. Again, they're free, and you should really use them throughout your career development and planning, almost like a blueprint for the pivots you need to make as you move ahead into new opportunities. And again, they're laddered. So it's a matter of saying, hey, I'm basic in a specific area like public speaking, but I'm more
Mhm.
advanced in leading teams. How do I balance those things out and close gaps? And I would say, we already talked a little bit about this, that it's not just about your technical skills, your intellectual quotient, your IQ, but back to the point that you made, we need to build our emotional intelligence, our EQ.
Yes.
So it's that EQ is as important as a competency as
Hmm.
what might be described as hard skills that are often needed to succeed in certain professions.
So important as you're going through leadership. I would also say, even as you are mid-level or senior level in your career, you still have to look at your emotions and really assess where you are, because those can change too over time.
Right.
So those ladders are very important, and I would imagine you could use those ladders even if you're shifting and changing careers.
Well, and that's what, as you're wanting to move into a different position, you're going to be evaluated by the hiring manager and the HR folks for suitability against the ladder they're hiring into. So you need to kind of plan ahead and think about, okay, what's my next move? and what gaps do I need to fill to move myself positionally so I'm ready or as ready as possible to take on the next step.
It's great.
Yeah.
All right. And then how about the next
Yeah,
level
so
or the next step?
number 5
Yeah.
is looking outside yourself. The last
Mhm.
2 were really inward thinking. The number 5 is all about active situational awareness. And being aware of the situation that we're in is something we need to do regularly. I'd say almost daily as events happen about what's going on today and what's happening or likely to happen tomorrow. So you need to deliberately survey the risk conditions that are happening all around you. And I alluded to this before, but by risk, I mean the downside hazards, things that could go wrong,
Mhm.
the upside opportunities, and the uncertainties that are outside of our control. So if we understand what these risks are, positive, negative, and unknown, we can be much more effective. We have to pay attention to not just the things that are obvious, but also to what I'll call the weak signals that are happening kind of on the horizon. So we need to understand the realities of the world we live in, back to that cartoon of all the ups
Right.
and downs and the gulfs and the bad weather that's brewing and so forth, so we can optimize our ability to be resilient and then be able to make smart, holistic changes in an agile way to dodge risks or capitalize on opportunities or crystallize uncertainties. To do that, we need to use what I describe as micro, macro, and meta lenses as we think about what's happening. Another simpler way to say that is we need to think inside the box, outside the box, the immediate box that we're in, but we got to think beyond our box and understand kind of what's happening behind the scenes that may be more subtle, that are manifesting themselves as risk issues inside and immediately outside the box. The final thing I
That's,
would recommend in
yeah.
doing this, Dr. O, you
Yes.
need to think through scenarios and think about what
Uh-huh.
if situations, and then think about, okay, where's the puck likely to go?
Mhm.
And then what do I do in light of those possibilities? And how is that going to move me forward relative to my North Star?
And I always say to my students, try to do an environmental scan outside of your own world because so many people get caught up in their own companies, their own departments, their own units, and they don't look outside. And, there's so much happening in our world today with the economy. Um, there are storms going on right now,
Right.
massive storms going
Yep.
on, and international things and what's happening overseas, and even just in food prices. It's really important to look around us and seeing what's happening. So that's a really great point you're talking about.
It's embracing all those forces of change and thinking through
Yes.
them in a deliberate way. Nobody's got a crystal ball, but
Hmm.
again, talking to your mentors, people who are more
Hmm.
experienced, smarter than you, have different perspectives, will open your thinking to different possibilities. They may have faced them already in their career, and they'll help you think through what's the story behind the story of what's going on here.
Great. And how about our last one, touching on the last one here?
Yeah, so the last thing is sort of the last step in the systematic strategic planning and outlook, and that's to
Hmm.
crystallize a portfolio of your, I'll call them change problems that you need to manage over the long term in a resilient and agile way. We all have various challenges, positive or negative ones, against again hazards and opportunities that we're not facing right now, but they are gates that we need to go through to get to where we want to be next. So it's important to take stock and literally write down exactly what you see the strategic pivot points are that you need to manage. I'm reminded of the conversation between Alice and the Cheshire Cat, in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. And it goes like, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. What I'm advocating here is don't be caught in that situation. Document these problems in a portfolio that you need to work on to follow and reach your North Star through various waypoints along the way. On a single sheet of paper, briefly describe your strategic plan as it relates to changes that you need to make and how you're going to measure success, whether it's qualitative or quantitatively. Then, once you have a single sheet of paper with the big picture strategies of pivots that you're going to be working on, then you can get down to business in tactical execution related to that plan.
This is a great six systematic strategies, and you've laid this out very nicely. But what if someone is fearful or they don't want to do the work for this? What might be some of the challenges there, the downsides, if they've got a lot of fear around
Yeah.
mapping this out?
Yeah. Well, boy, that is a great question. And I've certainly been there. And I guess
Uh-huh.
what I would say, Dr. O, is when I've been in those situations, a lot of times, unfortunately, I kind of like suffered through it and just persisted, kept going. Maybe it's a function of my personality or pain tolerance, whatever it might be. But I have to say, when you take that approach, you can be really miserable. So
Right.
I guess really the best way to put it, rather than trying to go it alone and just tough it
Mhm.
out, grit, there's a lot to be said for that, but you really need to make it a team sport and enlist people who care about you, family, friends, mentors, and coaches who will allow you to put things in perspective, give you a shoulder to cry on, frankly, and give you ideas, approaches, techniques to build your confidence. One of the simplest things is to not look at the difficulties that you're facing as a monolith. You have to break things down into manageable
Yeah.
pieces. That's where, when we get into the tactics, breaking
Mhm.
these big strategic things down into pieces makes them more manageable. It's the old,
Mhm.
how do you eat an elephant? It's like one bite at a time, right?
Right.
But if you're trying to focus on all the reasons why not and why this is so great, you can resort back to the positive mental attitude. That's part of it. You are in command. Use your ingenuity to how to attack a challenge and not become overwhelmed by it. But the mentors, again, the coaches make all the difference in the world. I had an executive coach, Dr. O, pretty far along in my career where things were really going great. I had kind of made it to a very high plateau I had been working on for a long time. But when I got my 360 feedback, which many
Yes.
organizations do, it
Mhm.
was a real mixed bag. And the
Mhm.
part of the bag that I was somewhat blindsided by was
Mhm.
really troubling. And, to encapsulate it, it was kind of like, can't live with them, can't live without them.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now?
Boy. Yeah.
And so I actually brought in an executive coach who really opened my eyes and helped
Mhm.
me to resolve what seemed to be an intractable problem for
Mhm.
me, because a lot of the reasons they couldn't live with me were all things that I thought were really helpful.
Mhm.
And they were well intentioned, but they drove people nuts a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so I had, in essence, a mentor coach and people who cared about me to tell me, my colleagues and people above, below, and around me to be honest and level with me. And then my coach helped me develop a plan to change my behaviors every day, and something I still have to work on all the time to make sure that
Right.
things that I feel are going to be, they're going to work, may be the worst thing you could do in a certain circumstance.
Well, and you said two really powerful things here. Again, those coaches and mentors to really help out. And then the other thing that you said that was powerful, Professor Erath, is being receptive and open to feedback, asking for feedback, or if you get feedback, to be receptive and do something about it and not be negative or fight back with it. And a lot of people don't enjoy receiving feedback. They can certainly give it, but receiving it's tough. By the way, folks, the 360 review is you're getting reviewed all around you, your boss, your subordinates, peers, customers, vendors. And it's great to have everybody around you giving you feedback. The goal here is to look into it and do something about it. All right, folks. So be sure to tune in for the next part of Empowering Personal Professional Leadership Pivots. Professor Erath is going to go over 10 systematic tactics for that and talk a little bit about change and change management.
You've been tuning in to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.